Good morning, good afternoon. Hopefully everyone can hear me. You should be able to see my screen already. A few more people probably starting to join, but we'll get cracking. Just a few little housekeeping things. This is being recorded and the slides will be sent out. Feel free to take pictures as you go along, but we will send them out by email afterwards. You should see a little question box. Everyone's on mute at the moment, but as we go along, if you do have any questions, you can just type them out and I'll get around to answering them. I'll probably wait till the end to answer, unless there's anything really pressing that I see pops up, but just feel free to jot them in there. You don't need to speak, don't need to show cameras or anything like that. Okay. Oops. Slides going funny. Okay, so my name, Michael Venner. A lot of you on here already know me. I can see a lot of familiar names on there. Been doing this for almost about 20 years now. I'm the Aerospace and Automotive Director for NQA. Previous to that, I owned another certification body that some of you know me from there. But been with NQA probably about 2 years now. Okay, and I mostly look after the aerospace and automotive schemes. As I say, slides will be distributed afterwards, so you'll get copies of everything we're about to go through. Right, topics for today. We're mostly covering the forthcoming changes to the standard. So although AS9100 or AS9120 standards such as that aren't changing themselves, the accreditation rules are changing. They're the rules that we have to follow. So when those change, they have a knock-on impact to clients that you need to be aware of. The changes aren't imminent, but you're probably talking the next 12 months. So certain things within your management systems that you might have to tweak to meet the new requirements. We'll put something out more formally, sort of nearer the time, but you should hopefully, if you get this sort of awareness now, you can start to implement some of these changes. So as I say, it's not directly changes on the standard itself, but there are new rules coming that we're going to have to impose onto organizations, especially from an audit planning perspective. So it's good to be aware of those. So times are going to change for your audit calculations. They're changing quite dramatically, so we'll go through those. Auditor rotations, site structures, things like that, they're all going to change coming up. All depends on your organization, how big the change is going to be, but every organization will have some change. Some are small, some are big. Okay. Excuse me. Okay, so one of the big changes that is coming in are audit durations. There's a new calculation tool that I'm going to go into a little bit more detail for calculating audit time. So at the moment, the standard's quite explicit in if you're 5 employees, for example, we must do 1.5 days. That's all changing. They've created this new tool called the OCAP Tool, which is a risk-based process for calculating audit time, which I'm going to go into a little bit more detail and give you some examples of how that will work in reality. The OCAP tool takes a lot of preparation and planning, and we need client inputs for those, which is a newer requirement that's coming in, which is going to require some specific audit planning time at the front of every single audit, not just at the start of a new organization, every single audit. And all clients are going to have to put input into that for us to enable us to calculate the audit time. Failure to do so can actually raise non-conformances. There's going to be a specific requirement for that. But as I say, I'll go into a little bit more detail. And they're going to allow us to adapt the audit time a little bit more as well. So at the moment, it's quite black and white. You must do sort of 2 days, 3 days, something like that. But what they're allowing us to do going forward is to actually manipulate that time a little bit more if there's certain clauses, that you're not necessarily doing in your organization. So it will be more applicable to multiple site organizations. If someone's not doing sort of sales on one site or purchasing, things like that, we can reduce the time. Okay, again, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on that shortly. Site structures, this is one of the bigger changes also. Currently there's 5 different structures that you can have as an organization. It can be single site, multiple site, campus, several, or complex. There's only actually 2 complex structures in the world. I'm assuming people on here aren't part of those, so we can ignore those. Campus and several site, that will impact quite a few clients that are possibly on this call or consultants. Those 2 structures are going along with complex. They're just reverting to single site and multi-site, which was ironic. Something many years ago that they had only single site, multi-site, then they brought in these other structures, but now they're taking them away again. Okay, if you're currently a several site or a complex organization, you will switch over to the multi-site structures. Won't be a huge amount of impact on you. The days will probably work out roughly the same. However, if you're a campus structure, it could be quite different. You can actually go one way or the other. You could turn into a single site, or you could turn into a multi-site. That's something we're going to have to discuss with all campus organizations nearer the time. What it's kind of boiling down to is if you require the address on the certificate, you'll switch over to a multi-site. If you don't, you can then switch to a single site. So obviously that structure is going to have a huge impact on the time. And currently campus structure is quite beneficial. It's a very small amount of time addition currently in the current structure. So then obviously if you're going from campus to a multi-site in the future, that could have huge implications on your audit time. So when I say about if you need the address on the certificate, it might sound quite strange, but as an example, some organizations will have like another unit over the road for overflow of work or storage, things like that. So if you've got a unit over the road from your main address that's purely used for storage of maybe tools or raw materials, something like that, you may not actually need that address on the certificate. Yeah, because it's purely for storage. We'll still need to audit it, but it's not something that you're sort of shipping from. Yeah. So those organizations can switch to a single site. That's the example where it can go one way or the other. But if you're sort of manufacturing from the other site, you know, your sort of customer communications, things like that, that's going to have to be on your certificate. Okay, so you'll switch to a multi-site. But when I think back to the previous slide where it says we can then adjust time for each of the sites, what we can start to do is say, okay, well, this site over the road, purely a machine shop, no design, no purchasing, no sales, things like that, we can actually reduce the time. So it won't be as sort of impacted on you as much as what it might first seem. So instead of 2 days, it might just be 1 day. Okay, things like that. It's going to be on a case-by-case basis, really, with campus structures. If you're already a single site and a multi-site, there's not huge changes, so you don't worry too much. There's other changes, but there's nothing really to the structures that you need to be worried about. Okay, transfer of certification. This is changing quite a bit for the better, actually. There's a few changes coming in. Currently, there's a requirement that if you transfer to another certification body, we get quite a few of these, where your certificate has got less than 12 months left on the certificate. So basically, your next audit's a reassessment. There's a crazy rule at the moment that requires an extra 2 days, at least 2 days really, assessment time to perform the transfer. That's going. We don't need to worry about that. So all transfers, no matter where you are in the cycle, will just require a 1 day transfer assessment. Can be half a day, just depends on the size of the organization. we don't need to put in any of the additional time that's currently on there. We have quite a few people wish to transfer currently, and they're just going into their reassessment, but their costs just, it's not worth it. It's not beneficial, purely because we have to add this extra time. So thankfully that's going. There's also a requirement though to switch out the auditors. Many organizations will transfer and they'll keep the same auditor. So we use quite a few contractors, transfer from our competitors, they transfer in and they get to keep the same auditor. So there's a bit of consistency there. They've removed that. So you can't have the same auditor now. If they were your auditor for the last 2 years, they can't then audit for another 2 years when you've transferred over. So they've kind of, the IAQG with this is kind of given with one hand, taken with another. So there's pros and cons about this process. The auditors themselves, there's a slight tweak to this. There's going to be a bit more internal management that we'll need to be careful of. So currently there's a requirement to change the auditors every 6 years. They've tweaked that slightly to every 6 audits. You might think that's the same, and it is for most organisations, but we do have some clients that have a visit every 6 months. So the auditor would need to change every 3 years, not 6. So it's a slight tweak in the definition there. And currently the rules are that the lead auditor needs to switch out. So some of the larger organisations will have 2 auditors going in every time, and then every 6 years the auditors switch, one from lead to the other one to a team member, and then we just keep rotating that. It's kind of a trick in the system, I suppose, but they've stamped that out. They've basically said that no, you can't do that. The entire team needs to leave the audit, leave the certification cycle. The good news is though, they've just said that's for 1 year. So there's some consistency still. Currently it's 3 years. So every 6 years we have to take the lead auditor out, put a new one in for another 3 years and then cycle through. But they've just changed it to just once, 1 year. Excuse me. Okay, I've already covered the transfer part. So this is a specific requirement that's coming in. This is mostly around the OCAP tool that I mentioned. Again, we're going to go into a little bit more detail in this shortly. Organisations are going to be required to take part in the audit planning process. So every organisation does at the moment. 3 months before the assessment, our system will send out a form, data gathering form that's emailed to every client. You have to fill that form in, send it back, and then we do our audit planning on that. They're getting much stricter on that going forward. There's a lot more detail going to have to be put into the audit planning process, which I'm going to cover. You're going to have to present so much data 6 to 3 months before the assessment is due. We will then have to produce the OCAP tool, which again I'm going to show you shortly. So we need a certain amount of data off of the client in order to do this. So, and there's a specific requirement in there that we will raise non-conformances if the client doesn't participate in this. So they're going to get quite strict on this. So you really got to be quite active. If you do them currently, the data gathering forms that are sent out, that's great. It's really helpful to us. We do actually need them. If you don't, you're going to start have to getting into the habit of doing those prior to the assessment. Okay. Okay, so we'll go on to the audit duration. So this is where I'm going to go a little bit more detail into the OCAP tool, because this is the bit that has the most influence. Okay, so say they've created this OCAP tool, which I'll actually demonstrate shortly, which we're going to have to go through. Currently, the standard doesn't say about audit planning or audit time. Yep, that's now in the new standard. So the audit calculation will actually generate audit planning time and audit report writing time, and they've put 10% on for each one. That's a minimum. So if we determine, which is quite common actually, that we need more time to do the audit report, we might say, okay, well, we're going to have to add an extra 10%. In the standard, what they're doing in the future is they're putting some specific time in there, and we have to produce records for that. Okay, obviously the record for the audit report is the audit report. The record for the audit plan is the completed OCAP tool. It's quite a detailed tool. Again, I'm going to come on to that. There's actually you can actually manipulate the time. One of the benefits of the OCAP tool is you can reduce your audit time. At one point it can go up, and another point it can actually come down. They're building it on a risk and performance based calculation. It can swing either way, but there's also another system in place where you can reduce it by up to 50%. So if you've been good, you can actually cut your audit time in half, which is obviously a huge cost saving for organisations. So what they're trying to do is drive performance. So if your performance has been really good, what it will do is reward you for that and say you can reduce your audit time by up to 50%. Okay, so I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on that, show you how you can do that. These are some of the things you can start doing now to benefit from that, because there's certain things you have to put in place to meet that requirement. And they're allowing up to 50% audits remote, which is good. Currently, obviously, everything we're allowed to do 100%. That's during the COVID pandemic. But once that's gone, currently we can't do any, well, we can do a very small portion of assessment time remotely. It's currently in the rules. But what they're doing is they're saying you can do up to 50% remotely going forward, which will be quite beneficial, because there are some benefits to remote auditing, especially if we're looking at sort of internal audits, management reviews. Sometimes that's good to do that off-site in your own time, because you get to spend a bit more time on it and digest some of the information. So that's a benefit there. Okay. Okay, so the OCAP tool itself. So as I say, it's going to work on a performance and risk-based approach. So you'll see this risk assessment is going to include on-time delivery performance, customer complaints, KPI results, pair scores, internal auditor competence, and size and complexity of the site. Now, the size and complexity of the site you possibly can't change, can't influence too much, but all the other elements you can. So what they're saying is if you've got better KPI results, better on-time delivery, yeah, your pair scores are good, things like that, you can reduce your audit time by up to 10%. Yeah, if your results aren't quite so good, you could get 10% added to your audit time. Okay, so I'm going to go into a little bit more detail in that shortly, but we have to evaluate this through the OCAP tool for any assessment. So this is where we need the data from the client organisation to input into this. If you don't give us the data, we'll just assume it's high risk and we'll add 10%. So it's in your favour to actually present this data and present it accurately and in the format they require. So you might need to tweak a few things on how you present your data. Again, I'm going to come on to that in a minute. Okay. Do see your question, Debbie. I'll do that at the end. Right, so here is just a small snapshot of one part of the OCAP tool. Okay, so this highlights those key areas down the left-hand side. So on-time delivery, product service rating, customer complaints, feedback, yeah, performance from the previous audits, internal audit program, things like that. Okay, and then what you'll see is we determine if it's low, medium, or high risk for each of those categories, yeah, depending on the data that's presented. So low risk would mean your on-time delivery is exceeding the requirement. There's a little trick to this, which I'll come on to in a minute. It's not straightforward, we're 100% on-time delivery. It's not that clear. Product service rating, again, if you're exceeding requirement, you go in low risk. And we select the category for each of them, and then out pops a number at the end. So on this one here, you see risk number is 33. That puts you into a medium category of risk. Okay, that will then basically determine the audit time, which I'll come on to in a minute. But basically, that will probably be no change to what you're currently doing. If your on-time delivery is not so good, your product performance isn't good, you've got some complaints, your previous audits weren't so good, you could go in the high risk, and that's where that would then switch out to giving you 10% extra time. Okay, and then likewise, if it's low risk, you get 10% reduction in time. So for each of the categories, I won't open the OCAP tool in total because it's a huge mammoth Excel sheet, but I've taken some snapshots out of each category on the performance element to give you an idea of the types of information we're going to require. So for on-time delivery, this is their definition, okay? And it's not quite black and white. You know, if you say your on-time delivery is 90%, that doesn't mean you're a low, medium or high risk. It's, are you meeting 90% of the customer's requirements? Okay, so there's a slight difference. So you won't be able to simply hand us over some data that shows you're 90% on-time delivery or 100% or whatever. You need to kind of show that for each of the customers, and then we'll have to evaluate whether 90% of the customers are actually being met on time. So you're possibly going to have to tweak your KPI data that you're presenting slightly to make sure we get this information accurately. Okay, so in the definition bit, you'll see there right at the end of the first paragraph, it references SCMH 7.11.2. That references the Supply Chain Management Handbook. That is on the Oasis database. I don't know if anyone's had a look at it. It's worthwhile looking at. There's lots of tools and information on the Supply Chain Handbook. Everything's free. It basically gives you guidance on how you can implement the standard and meet standard requirements. So if you're looking at a clause in the standard and you're not too clear what it means, if you actually go into the Supply Chain Handbook, it will give you a lot of information around that. So what they're doing here is they're referring you to that document, and I downloaded this document yesterday to actually give you some information on what they're expecting you to present and how you can measure your on-time delivery. So I recommend you actually look at that document. I say it's totally free. Just go on the Oasis database, look for Supply Chain Management Handbook, and it's all in there. Okay. Likewise, around product service rating, follows a similar process. So you can't just present us with data for your top customers showing you're all great, and then you've got another half of, 50% of your customers are terrible. It's trying to encourage you to improve your overall performance. Yep. So that's where we would categorize low, medium, high for that. Again, it's referring out to Supply Chain Management Handbook. So I recommend you read that again for this one. It's going to be presenting the data in a certain format, so I recommend you look at it. A lot of you will have the data already. Yeah, the data is not going to necessarily change. It's more the way you present it and you measure your KPIs. Yeah, so it's going to be a lot stricter in how they're presented. They're putting a bit more sort of framework around it. Okay. Customer complaints. Quite self-explanatory. That's how they're categorizing it. There's a big spelling mistake in there. That's how. Yeah, quite self-explanatory. It will have to be a bit pragmatic. The larger the organisation, possibly there's going to be more non-conformances, so it's not going to be a number. It'll have to be a percentage driven. They haven't actually given us that, so we'll have to create that ourselves and determine what we feel is feasible. Okay. The KPIs, this is quite an easy one for us to do, and this will be based around the pair KPIs. Yeah, so as we're going through the pairs, be the results on the previous reports and things like that. Obviously, if you're a new organization, you possibly won't have this data. You should do, but it possibly not in the correct format. So we might have to just sort of, for new organizations, just assume medium or high risk. Okay, but again, if you look at what they're asking for, so low risk, 90% of the KPI meet or exceed goals with a plan for shortfalls. So that's kind of saying, I don't know, out of 10 of your KPIs, 9 of them are being met. Yeah, things like that. So again, it's the data's there, it's just how you present it might be slightly different. We will sort of release something a bit more formal nearer the time, because this standard's actually still in draft. It's not draft, it's kind of final draft. So it hasn't formally been released yet, but when they formally release it, we'll put out some more information. All right, so this is the OCAP calculation. So once we've determined the risk based on all those previous slides, yeah, we then put the risk in, put the employee numbers in, put the visit type, and then it starts spitting out some audit time. So you'll see in there, I've just made an example up here, 40 employees, it's a surveillance, yeah, medium risk, no design. So you'll see there when I've gone down on the reductions, it started to take time off, okay? And that spat out a number of 1.6 days maximum reduction, but it's saying my audit duration will be 2 days. So I'm just going to have to move my screen a bit. Okay, so you'll see there's two different numbers. There's audit duration and audit time. Audit duration is the physical audit duration on site, yeah, where we're going to have to be auditing, typically the 8-hour day type thing, yeah. The audit time is the time that's included for the audit reporting and audit planning perspective. So that's the 20% they've added. Okay, so the audit report could be off-site, can be on-site. So just as this example, I've just run it through examples, and what we would currently do for this type of organisation that's 40 employees, we would do 2 days plus half a day audit report writing. So it actually comes out exactly the same number for medium risk on this, yeah, because it's 2.4, we'd always round that up to the nearest half a day. Yeah, so it comes out exactly the same number, so there's no impact there. We also ran exactly the same scenario with 40 employees, but one for high risk and one for low. So if you've been good performance, good history, you then go into the low risk. Yeah, so that's on the left-hand side. And then if you've not been so good with your performance, you go on the high risk, which is on the right-hand side. And you'll notice here it does actually have an impact on the time. Not so much for the high risk, you still stay in the same band. Yeah, audit duration is 2 days, audit time is 2.4. However, on the low risk, you can actually reduce your audit time by half a day. Yeah, so audit duration is 1.5, and then the audit time would be 1.8. We'd round that up again to the nearest half a day, so that would be 2 days. So basically, you're saving half a day of your audit time for this type of organisation, which could be a big cost saving, really. Obviously, the numbers change as you go up. You know, the more employees, the greater the impact. But for 40 employees, that's what the change would be. So you'll also notice in there the maximum reduction is up to 50%. So how you get up to 50% is when you've been really good, in all honesty. So they've introduced what they call a PBS RP process. Yeah. This requires an initial qualification and then an annual qualification. This will warrant you to receive the 50% reduction. So the initial qualification, you need to have completed at least one cycle. So that means you need to have gone through initial assessment and recertification. That will, so basically new organisations don't qualify for that. You need to have at least 3 years records of an assessment. We need to do the annual performance results for the OCAP, that's fine. Internal audit program, you've got to have an annual audit of the QMS in total. Some organisations don't do a full audit of their internal audits. They might miss out training or calibration or something like that and just cycle it in every 2 or 3 years. I'm saying you can't do that. It's got to be every year. You've got to cover the full system. Not too difficult to do. Continual audit program, not event driven, risk based. So people's management systems and internal audits should be kind of risk based anyway. That's what you should be doing. So, looking at the risks of the organisation, looking at your processes and building that into your audit program. Input driven, KPIs, customer complaints. That's using the KPI data to drive your internal audits, feeding that back into the system. I actually done a training session on this 2 days ago. We are running some more, which I'll go into quite a bit of detail on this if anyone's interested. Changes, it's basically managing your internal audit program more effectively, not just doing the same program every year. It's basing it on risk, performance, things like that. Changes. You're noticing they're competent internal auditors as well. If you go back to the OCAP tool, one of the requirements for the auditors, one of the risk things was for the internal auditors. What they're basically building in is the internal auditors need to have attended the same training courses that we have. So we have to attend what they call an AATT course. It's actually changing, but that's what it is currently. If you've attended that, you can then go into the low risk category. What they're saying is to do the PBS and RP qualification, you need to have attended that training. You don't need to be registered on OASIS. That's kind of something different. But you need to have attended the same courses that we do. Yeah, they're basically saying you're kind of as good as we are. So that's one of the things you need to do. So if you're a consultant, it might be worth you looking at getting yourself on the training courses. I wouldn't do it yet because they are all changing. I'd wait nearer the time, get on the newer courses. But it might be a sort of selling point for you because you can help drive this sort of these processes that can reduce the client's audit time. So it might be quite beneficial there. You need to create an ethics policy. Ethics is implied in the standard at the moment, but they haven't got a requirement for a policy, a strict policy. Seems strange to me that they've put it in here because it's not in AS 9100, but that's what they've created. So you'd need to create an ethics policy, documented, things like that. No major NCRs. This could be quite contentious. If someone's striving for PBS RP and an auditor wants to raise a major, can get quite interesting. So we're going to have to be sure that we're definitely on a major. We don't raise them for the sake of it, but there's quite a lot of pressure on us. And obviously, if we get things wrong, then there's a lot of pressure on us. We can get our certificate suspended. So, there's going to be a bit of interesting conversations going on there. Can't have been suspended in the last 6 years. Doesn't happen often. People do get suspended, obviously, but doesn't happen too often. So again, it's about keeping your nose clean, keeping the performance up, things like that. Okay, and no violations, regulatory approvals. It's kind of self-explanatory. So once you have the initial qualification, you can reduce your time by 50%, and then we just have to do an annual review of that just to make sure you're still performing as you should. Yeah, we haven't raised any major non-conformances and things like that. So it's not a hard thing to maintain as long as you're keeping your performance up and you're driving your KPIs, looking for continual improvement, and not letting your system slip. So as I say, it could be a huge cost saving for some organisations. Okay, so transition timeline, which I think answers your question, Debbie, if I'm reading it right. The accreditation bodies such as UCAS or ANAB, depending on where you are, they will have to be approved within 12 months of publication. I'll go into when this is going to be released in a second. Certification bodies such as NQA, we will then need to get accredited 18 months after the publication date. Yep. So basically 6 months after UCAS have to be. And then all existing certificates will transition at their next recert. So it depends where you are in your cycle to when this comes out as to when you're likely to get the sort of audited to the new process. Okay. So your site could stay a campus for a couple of years before it switches over. They're basically doing it at the next recert. So where the hold up is on this is Oasis. So the standard's actually in its final draft, it's out. It's basically not going to change from what we have. So all of these rules that I've gone through, they're going to stay. They haven't formally released the standard because there's a sticking point on Oasis. Oasis is actually going. It's going to be replaced with something else, possibly still called Oasis, but it's going to look totally different. So what they're not doing is putting money into the current system because they're throwing it all on the new system. But the problem is we need Oasis to change in order to deal with these new structures, and there's a new report that we've got that ties into all of this. They need to basically build that into the software in Oasis. They're a bit hesitant to do that at the moment. So it's just there's a bit of a standoff. They still think this standard will come out this year. They're just trying to work out what's realistically possible because they want to get this standard out quickly and get everyone through it as soon as possible, because otherwise this could go on for 3-6 years or something like that. So I expect sort of this year it will come out. So I imagine 2 years from now, clients should start going through the process probably of being certified, maybe 18 months. But I feel that's probably a realistic time frame there. Okay, so the kind of things to look out for you as a client. We're going to be putting a lot more attention on the KPI performance. We're actually upping our game now on this. We've done quite a bit of training internally. Some more went out yesterday, just so the auditors can start putting a little bit more, not so much pressure. Pressure is the wrong word, but trying to encourage clients to up their game with their KPIs, just to sort of start getting you up there, because want to help you drive your performance up and sort of get into these low risk band categories really. But that's something you've got to focus on yourselves, obviously drive that performance. Possible changes to auditors, I mean that's always the case. So there's nothing really you need to worry about. It's just we're always cycling through auditors anyway. Site structure, again, depends on the site structure you're on at the moment. That can have an implication. The audit planning, that's something you will be penalised on. So the data gathering forms that we currently send out, really you should be filling those in. If you don't receive them from our system, our auditors should be chasing you for them. Yeah, fill those in, get them back. We do actually look at those, believe it or not. They're just not a form just to fill in. We actually use that for our audit planning. So when we don't get those back, it can make it quite tricky. But say with the OCAP tool that's coming in, you're going to be forced to fill those in. If not, you will receive non-conformances. Ensure your data is true and accurate. I had a classic one yesterday. One of our auditors was on site. Company was presenting 100% on-time delivery and quality. He asked to see the data, and the actual data told it totally different. We're talking like 50%. It was hugely different. You'll be penalised for that now, but we're going to be a lot stricter on that in the new standard, because it does have an impact on your audit time. So don't just think you can put in and say we're 100% on-time delivery, because we will be challenging the data, checking it's accurate. And if it's not, then you get non-conformances. Start driving your on-time delivery and quality. Yeah, not just for 1 or 2 customers. You've got to raise the bar for all the customers. Yeah, so start looking at that. Internal audit training, as I say, that's something that many of you can start to look at as well. Wait for the new training to come out. They are working on that. That standard's actually out at the moment, so we'll probably start seeing those being announced quite soon. We're actually looking at that ourselves and how we can deliver that. And the pair scores, those will impact the results. You know, the 1 to 5, you want to make sure you're getting the 4s and the 5s. So if you are missing your KPIs, make sure you've got actions in place to sort of address the KPI shortfalls. Okay, so that's the end of kind of the update. There's a few other little bits in the standard, but they don't really impact clients. They impact us quite a lot. But there's nothing really that impacts clients and consultants, so I haven't covered those. So I'll just go through the questions. Hopefully, Debbie, that answered your. When does the auditor time begin? At the time of the release of the new requirement? Oh, the cycle for the 6. No, they'll use the historic data for that. So if someone's been with you for 5 years already, that will switch out. They won't start the clock again for that. Yeah, they'll cycle through that. I think that answers David's question as well, actually. Yeah, so it basically looks back retrospectively because it is something we already do. They're just tweaking it. So every year we look at that. We generate reports. We pull the data from our system and Oasis, and we see how many audits an auditor has done. So David, can customer on-time delivery and DPPM scorecard data be used, or is it self-calculated data requirement? Not sure what you mean there. Can customer on-time delivery and DPPM scorecard be used? Yeah, so your customer data. That's a good question, actually, David. I'd probably say no, because you have to look at more than just one customer, because they're asking you to look at across the client base, not just one of them. So it depends on the customer data you're being presented, but I'd probably hazard a guess to say no. If you look at the supply chain handbook, that document that I referred to, gives you a little bit more detail on what they're expecting in there. I say it's free to download. So Kevin, I have a stage 1 in May and stage 2 later this year. This won't impact this. No, correct, it won't, because it's not out just yet. So you're still on the current standard, really, how that works. So Probitas authentication approved, lead auditing course 900. Is it enough for internal auditors qualification? Probitas approved. No, it'd have to be the AATT course. Yeah. That you have to attend. They've kind of got these 3 ratings. There's basically, if you've got 9001 or at nothing, you go on high risk. If you've done like the AS9100 lead auditor, sorry, the AATT, you go in medium risk, and if you're Oasis, you go low risk. So there's different categories for that. But yeah, just a lead auditor course 9001 with AS9100 tagged on wouldn't be enough. Doesn't hurt, but it won't benefit for the reduction in time. Being a low volume company, I see the KPIs but customer adversely affecting us. Some of our customers only get 1 unit per year. If we were late on that, yeah, that Nigel, yes, that can be a problem. Yeah, if you only got 1 delivery a year, that can actually impact you, yeah, quite a bit. I see that quite a lot. That's something you're just going to have to manage out, I think. So if you read the supply chain handbook document, they give you quite a lot of detail in there on how to calculate your KPIs. There's actually equations in there and the KPIs that you should use for each of the processes. It's quite a useful document, actually, which might be able to help you in that. But you can kind of, depends on how many of your customers are the low volumes, in all honesty, in how that will work. You know, you might have a small number, but you might have a huge number. Okay. So can you explain the internal audit qualification again, please? Okay. So there's all kinds of different qualifications out there. for auditors. There's 9001. You could do an internal audit 9001. You could do an IRCA or equivalent lead auditor 9001. Okay, but with the aerospace scheme, they've got a specific training requirements, which is called the AATT course. That is what they're meaning for the internal auditors. Basically, what they're saying is if your internal auditors are the same qualification level as us, they've received the same training, now, the risk is lower because you've gone through the same training as us, and as you know, there's whole week's course and there's online modules and everything like that. So what they're saying is if you do that, you can then go into the lower category. If you've just done a 9001 or something, another course or an internal audit course, that doesn't qualify. Yep, you have to go on the same training as us. So hopefully that helps you. You don't have to be on Oasis. That's the difference, because Oasis requires other information as well. Interestingly though, does IRCA training count? No, IRCA isn't part of the IAQG. They're not actually recognised. So IRCA does not count at all for the aerospace scheme. Okay, in terms of this. What they are actually doing is they're making it easier for auditors to get into the scheme. So at the moment, there's a bit of a problem. It's been going on for years, in honesty, where we struggle to get new auditors into the scheme. You have to have certain qualifications, experience, and things like that, and it's quite tricky. What they're actually doing is relaxing the rules slightly. I'm going off topic a little bit, but might be of interest to some people. So if you've got, there's two levels of auditors. There's AA and there's AEA. To be an AEA, you have to be a lead auditor and show so many years experience in the industry. An AA can be a team member, so they can never lead. What they're doing is they're making it easier to be an AA. So if you've got a background in, say, aerospace, obviously, automotive or medical or something like that, they can actually allow you to become an AA auditor. And they're saying after 3 years for doing, I think it's about 40 audits of being an AA, they will then qualify you to be an AEA on the back of that. That's not currently something that's in, but it will be beneficial. So if people out there have not quite got the full experience that they require, or maybe some of your experience is older, you know, it's outside of the 10-year limit and things like that, what they're saying is, okay, we'll come in as an AA, we'll do some extra training, you get the same test that we do, be a team member for 3 years on, so I think it's about 40 audits, something like that. And then if you've proven to be good, they will then qualify you to an AEA, and then you can go off and lead and do everything that we can. So it's quite good that they're bringing that in, actually. It's been something we've been crying for many years, and it's going to help with the resources. So if there's anyone out there that's kind of interested, that's definitely worthwhile getting yourself qualified for that. So another question, do we need to refresh AS9100 auditor training done a few years ago? Depends what the training was. Let's say the AS9100 isn't changing. That's staying the same. This is just an accreditation standard that's changing that will impact the clients. Yeah, so you don't necessarily need to go on a training for that. But if you've done the AATT, for example, then that qualifies you the same as us. So I'm not sure what training you're referring to there. What minimum qualifications need to be a head chief technologist of a laboratory? I'm not actually sure of that, because it depends on the lab and what they're doing and things like that. So I don't actually know that answer, I'm afraid. Where would we read about the auditor qualifications? Okay, auditor qualifications are in, get ready, AS9101, sorry, AS9104-3 standard. Okay, so the one I've kind of just run through was the -1. The auditor qualifications is actually in the -3, and that is out now. That's a new standard or a new revision, and all the qualification requirements are in there for you. And it says there's all kinds of stuff in there. So if you go through that, it's on the SAE website. John Bloom, do NQA issue AS 9100 and 9120 auto certs meet this? No. No, they don't, because we don't do the full AATT course. But I'll say I am actually looking at that, so we may do very shortly. I'm just talking to a few people on providing that. So currently, no. Okay, any more questions? There's been quite a few questions actually. Anything else from anyone? Is the AATT available virtually? It was, yes. At the moment it is, and there are certain modules that are online anyway. So yeah, it is currently. Yeah, each training provider has had to get special dispensation from the IAQG. So it depends where you are and things like that. So some are, some aren't, is the answer. So to do the AATT course, do you need to have previous industry experience? No, you don't, Justine. Anyone can attend as long as you've been on a lead auditor course. If you haven't been on a lead auditor course, you'll fail it because you'll just be bamboozled. So as long as you've done a ISO 9001 lead auditor, they will allow you to attend the courses. Okay, yeah, so anyone can attend that. No problem. Yeah, we did actually, when I remember doing my course, how many years ago? Quite a few years ago. There were quite a lot of consultants on the training courses actually, and I do know some that have attended the AATT courses just to help them with their consulting work. So it's beneficial. It's worth doing. If you just go in just for education, then you're not under as much pressure to pass the exams, because it's quite a hard exam, won't lie. But if you're going there just to raise your awareness, then it's not so bad. Sit back and enjoy the show. So if you have an internal audit course, you can't go on the AATT. No, you cannot. No, you have to go on the 9001 lead auditor courses. I mean, they might let you on, but in all honesty, it'll bamboozle you, because they don't go over lead auditor training. It's very different techniques, and the internal auditor training wouldn't have taught you any of the sort of basic techniques where a lead auditor course would. And if you went on it, you'll just be, yeah, it will just cripple you too much. So yeah, that's why they say at least go on the 9001. So Justine, does your AS 900 course help towards the information needed for the AATT? Oh, the internal audit one, is that what you mean, Justine? Yeah, to be honest, the AATT course is quite strange. They don't teach you the standard. There is nothing in there about learning the standard at all. That's all online modules. The AATT course itself is auditing techniques. So I don't know if people have got experienced the difference between a 9001 auditor, like a QMS auditor, and an aerospace auditor. It's quite different. We approach things differently, we think differently, our auditing style's different. That's all because of the AATT training. Okay, it's not to say we're better than 9001 or anything like that. It's we're taught different techniques and we approach things differently. That's what the AATT course does. And as I say, strangely, they don't teach you anything about the AS 9100 standard. You're expected to know that already, and you have to pass online courses before you can attend the AATT, which does go into the AS 9100 standard. So if you've done an internal auditor course against 9100 for knowledge, that will help you complete the online modules. You basically can't attend a classroom until you pass the online modules. But they're quite good, the online modules. Yeah, so they're fairly straightforward to pass. There's a bit of sitting down. It'll probably take you a day to do each one, and I think there's, I'm trying to remember now, I think there's 2. So there's 2 for AS 9100, and there'll be 2 for AS 9120 if you want to do that as well. But yeah, they take a good day each probably. That's what teaches you the standard. Okay, Anyone else? Anyone else? No. Okay, well, if you do have any questions afterwards, I didn't. I should have. I usually put my email up here. But if you've got a pen, my email is michael.venner, VENNER, at NQA.com. We do have a group one as well, Aerospace at NQA.com. So if you can't remember my email, just put it into there, and if you address it to me, that will bounce around to me. So if you've got any other questions afterwards, just feel free to drop us an email, and happy to talk on the phone if it's easier. If anyone's got any detailed questions they want to run through, happy to do that. Okay, so I don't think there's any other questions, so I'll bid you all goodbye. Let's say keep an eye out. We will be putting more information out about the changes that are coming in, when they're coming in, when we know more, things you need to do. We do put a lot of articles out, blogs. I'm going to do some more around the KPIs actually quite shortly, put them out on the website. I'll put them out on LinkedIn and things like that, to try and encourage clients and consultants just to kind of get the KPI bit right, because I think that's where I feel a lot of people will fall down on the new OCAP tool. So try and help you as much as possible. Okay, let's say these will come out to you. We'll email them out. But if you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to drop us a line. Okay, keep safe. Thank you.